Hi everyone, welcome to a quick video here where I'm going to go and break down my week 1 goals for tanking as a Blood DK in Cataclysm launch, with a focus on gearing up and getting towards that week 1 raid release and progressing as far as we can with our gear set and talent options. So without further ado, let's get into the talents that we're going to be using. So whilst we're leveling up and farming those 5-mans, this is the talent build I'm going to be rocking. Key optional notes here we can see in terms of glyphs, we're going to be using Glyph of Death and Decay. You can substitute this out for Heartstrike if you want to, it's personal preference. In terms of overall other options, these are just your best well-rounded set for major and minors. You do have the option if you want to, if you have confidence in your group and don't need the rune tap glyph, you can put in here a Glyph of Pestilence and just make it a little bit easier to spread your diseases around. However, everything else here is pretty much a stock standard build as you would expect. Optional points in Blood do go into Abomination's Might, just gives you a bit of more options in terms of your group stacking if no one else is bringing these buffs. You could take these out here and put one into Bloodcake Blade and put a second point into Crimson Scourge if you do have someone else bringing this buff. In terms of raid setup, what we're going to be utilizing instead is a couple of different glyphs. We're going to be using Glyph of Death Coil because we're going to be taking the Lichborne feature that Death Knights can have, where you can make a macro that you can spam, and whilst active, once you cast a Lichborne, you can cast Death Coil directly on yourself, and synergizing with Glyph of Death's Embrace, you can get 3 or 4 Death Coils out to yourself if you start with a full runic power bar. And that can be a very vital self-healing tool in a couple of encounters in tier 11. Now, in terms of our major glyphs, we've got a couple of changes here. There's a few fights where we do value movement speed on, and as Death Knight, that is our weakest aspect of playing the class. We're a very versatile tank, but we're very immobile. In terms of Glyph of Dancing Weapon, I just find that this is very comfortable and just makes your openers absolutely really solid and robust in terms of your threat generation, and just makes it so that you never have to worry about threat so long as you get your initial sort of 8 to 10 button presses off in the correct order with Dancing Weapon active. There are some fire mages that are absolutely smashing the threat meters right now on pull, so you do have to be mindful of that. Now, in terms of other options, again, in a raid environment, you could look to drop out the Abomination's Might. I just prefer to bring it as until we get some active sims. I don't really know how valuable the Bloodcake Blade is. It's a more of a damage-focused build, and we're not looking to push that whilst we're progressing into this raid tier. We're just trying to get survivability and utility, which is why we're picking up Endless Winter, which will allow us to be a primary kick on a lot of encounters, things like Maloriac, things like Omnitron Defense System, to name a couple of encounters. Now, getting into the gear then, for week 1, we're going to be focusing on an engineering leatherworking profile. Another good option you could look to do would be to pick up alchemy to get the Lifeblood Alchemist Stone. An absolutely fantastic trinket. Personally, I would be looking to replace this by week 2 anyway, at the latest, with Mirror of Broken Images from Baradin Hold Reputation Grind. So that's why I'm not going to be going Alchemy, because by hopefully the second week, I'm going to replace the trinket anyway. Now, this does have Zinrock. To all my fellow diggers out there who have not been successful in attaining this weapon like myself, we have a couple of options. We have the Foe Reaper if we're looking to get some hit and expertise to make this spec a bit more playable and better quality of life. Or alternatively, we can push more mastery and get the Sword of the Bottomless Pit. Now, things to note here, we've got a couple of reputation pieces. Starting with Ramkehem, we have a Revered Ring. This is absolutely fantastic. 100% recommend picking this up as soon as you get Revered with Ramkehem. And once you get Exalted with them, you can pick up these braces. So that's why I'll be focusing Ramkehem as my first reputation in week 1. Following that, I will be maxing out the Guardians of Hyjal to get the cloak, which will be staying with me for the entire raid tier. It's just such a solid cloak. It's really, really well rounded. There are other options. I think there's even some BOEs that you can consider, and there's also an awful lot of DPS cloaks. However, my personal preference will be to not take anything away from the DPSs throughout the raid tier. So grab this rep cloak and put it on and forget about the slot for the rest of the tier. The last reputation item we're going to have are the boots from the Twilight Highlands rep with your faction, as these are just really the best that we can get for that slot. Now, in terms of what we're going to be spending our Justice points on, we'll be picking up the Greaves of Splendor and the Numbing Handguards. This will take most of your Justice points for week 1, but you will be able to recap and go throughout the number of heroics that you will be spamming for all this reputation grinding. Now, in terms of crafted, we're going to be picking up the blacksmith belt and the blacksmith chestplate. They're just an absolute no-brainer, but make sure you're picking up a blacksmith in your party whilst you're farming these 5-man dungeons, as you believe the crafting orbs are still going to be bind on pickup. Also crafted, obviously, engineering helmet, just a non-brainer, best in slot until you get a 372 item. So from the heroics themselves, we're going to be picking up this neck piece, the shoulder pads, the ring, and that should be it, so long as you can also get the Leaden Despair trinket. This trinket is just head and shoulders above pretty much everything else that isn't the alchemy trinket, and we would only really look to replace it with Symbiotic Worm from Magmoor in Blackwind Descent. So that's just an overall look for what week one's goals are in terms of before we head into a raid. So once we get into the raid, and we're farming the tier, our absolute BIS will be this setup here, and this is focusing very heavily on avoidance. Now, the downsides of this, I'll just highlight them first, is we have very little expertise and we have little to no hit rating, but this build is focusing absolutely on your effective health pool through avoidance calculations, as it has a significant higher amount than the build I will personally be running. Now, in terms of its overall versatility here, this build will last longer than any other build you can get. However, this is what I will be rocking as my best in slot for the tier. Personally, for playstyle, I prefer to get to the 26 expertise soft cap and the 8% hit rating, or as you can see, as close to it as we can get. We're sacrificing just over 8% hit rating, sorry, 8% avoidance rating, but overall, this just has a much smoother playstyle and is very similar in terms of items. Key thing to note here, we are focusing very much on stamina over mastery in terms of options, so things like the glove enchant. A lot of people are finding fights where you can have the mastery as a higher importance than the stamina, but personally, my playstyle at the moment is just saying, well, stamina is pushing a bit more damage, and it's also pushing a lot more versatility when you have magic damage fights as the focus. So things like Trogal, things like Atramedes, even things like Maloriak, you have a huge requirement to have a bigger health pool than you do the ability to have a bigger physical damage shield for your mastery. Just another one, you have options with your boot enchant. I always suggest getting the movement speed. You never know how important that can be, and especially as a Death Knight, we are the least mobile class in the game in terms of tanks, so just that passive movement speed is 100% recommended to pick up. Even though we're also picking up the glyph of Bone Shield, it's not going to be active all the time, whereas your boot enchant is. So overall, that's what I will be working towards for tier 11. Please let me know what you think of the video. Leave a comment, and a like helps out an awful lot. And look forward to making a bit more of this content for you guys in the future. Stay tuned.